It was supposed to be a moment of pure joy, a royal fairy tale come to life. Cameras flashing, the world waiting, and two newly minted parents beaming as they introduced their firstborn child to the planet. But behind those polished smiles, something felt off. The air was thick, the smiles a bit too perfect, the moment strangely rehearsed. And when the flashbulbs went off, one man standing behind his camera lens saw something that made his stomach drop. What if that baby wasn't real? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. That's the question that's haunted royal watchers, photographers, and insiders ever since that quiet morning at Windsor Castle in May 2019, the day Meghan Markle and Prince Harry presented baby Archie Harrison to the world. To most, it was a quick photo opportunity, just another chapter in the royal family's glittering story. But to one man behind the camera, a seasoned royal photographer who had shot countless royal births, christenings, and milestones, it became the day he could never forget. Because when he zoomed in on one particular frame, something about that tiny bundle Meghan was holding made no sense at all. The light hit the baby's face in a strange way. The skin texture looked unnatural. The head tilted stiffly, unmoving even as Meghan adjusted her grip. Harry's eyes darted nervously to the cameras, his laugh strained. And in that split second, the photographer said later, he felt a cold chill run down his spine, the kind that comes when your instincts scream that something's very wrong. He didn't speak that day. Who would dare question the Duke and Duchess of Sussex during one of the most tightly controlled media events of the decade? But as the years passed and his conscience grew heavier, he began to talk. Quietly, carefully, until finally, he revealed what he had always suspected, that the baby the world saw at Windsor Castle may not have been a baby at all. Now, before you dismiss that as another wild theory, ask yourself this. Why did the palace restrict photo access so severely that day? Why were only 3 journalists allowed into the room, all pre-approved and tightly monitored? Why were the cameras placed at an unusually long distance, preventing any close-up shots of the newborn's face? Even for the royal family, who value privacy above all, this was unprecedented. Compare it to previous royal births, William and Kate stepping out of the Lindo wing with their newborns, waving to cheering crowds, giving the world clear glimpses of their babies' faces. No restrictions, no tension, no secrecy, just proud parents sharing joy. But Meghan and Harry's event? Completely different. Staged indoors, limited press, no close-ups, no crowd, no spontaneity. And here's where things start to twist. Because shortly after that photo call, whispers began to circulate within the royal press pool. Small things at first. Remarks about how oddly rigid the baby appeared, how Meghan's arm position never shifted even once, how not a single photo captured the baby's eyes open. Some dismissed it as nitpicking. Others laughed it off as internet nonsense. But a few, including the photographer who would later come forward, quietly archived their copies of that footage, saying something about it didn't sit right. Years later, his conscience finally pushed him to speak. He described how, after reviewing the raw files, he noticed small inconsistencies, the way light reflected off the baby's skin, almost plastic-like, the lack of natural facial softness that real infants have under flash photography. He swore the image data looked altered or off, and while he couldn't prove anything that day, he said it haunted him every time he looked back at his portfolio. But this isn't just about one man's suspicion. It's about the layers of secrecy that surrounded that moment. Because Meghan's team controlled every second of that day, from the lighting setup to who could speak to the couple. Multiple insiders have claimed that Meghan personally rejected several press requests, insisting on her chosen camera crew. Even Harry, usually relaxed around the media, seemed tense, glancing repeatedly toward the palace aides in the corner. Why? Because something was being protected or hidden. Now, think about the symbolism of that moment. A prince and his wife, once celebrated as the fresh, modern face of the monarchy, introducing their child under a veil of control and distance. It wasn't joy that filled that room. It was discomfort. The smiles looked forced. Meghan's posture, perfect, still, unflinching. Harry's nervous chatter about the baby's already got a little bit of facial hair landed awkwardly, almost rehearsed. It felt like a scene, not a moment. And yet, millions around the world watched without blinking. The photos went viral. The headlines wrote themselves, "A new royal era begins." The Sussex baby makes his debut. But beneath the polished exterior, something darker lingered. Something the public couldn't see, but the photographer did. He claimed that when he tried to re-access the original images a week later, his credentials were suddenly suspended. The file permissions had changed. He was told that all raw images from that day were to be handled by palace archives only. In his decades-long career, he said, that had never happened before. Not once. That's when he began to wonder if the story he was told, and the story the world was told, might not be the same. Years later, during a private interview, he revealed fragments of that day. He spoke of the odd weight distribution in Meghan's arms, the uncanny stillness of the baby's form, and the strange restrictions placed on his angles. He said he'd seen real babies in royal shoots, crying, squirming, wriggling. But this one, motionless, perfectly still. Could it have been nerves? Could it have been coincidence? Of course. But the more he spoke, the more his recollections aligned with subtle inconsistencies spotted by royal watchers worldwide. For instance, when comparing frames from the photo call, shadows on the baby's blanket seemed inconsistent with the light direction in the room. In one shot, the head tilts. In another, it doesn't. Yet Meghan's arm hasn't moved at all. Stranger still, several outlets later admitted they received edited versions of the images, allegedly at Meghan's request. Why edit simple baby photos? Why blur lighting imperfections or adjust color tones, unless there was something to hide? And here's where it gets even more curious. Because in the years that followed, Archie Harrison himself largely disappeared from public view. No birthday portraits. No verified family outings. Just a few curated, heavily controlled images released through PR firms or social media accounts, often with faces partially obscured or blurred. Coincidence? Or continuation? The photographer's confession reignited all those questions. He said he regretted not speaking sooner, that his silence enabled a myth. But even in his later years, he feared retaliation. After all, challenging the royal narrative isn't something done lightly. Careers have ended for less. And yet, the truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface, especially when it's buried under royal protocol, NDAs, and image management. So here's where the story starts to unravel. Because this wasn't just one man's observation. It was part of a larger pattern, a pattern of controlled narratives, image manipulation, and an obsession with optics that has followed Meghan Markle from Hollywood. What if the baby the world met that sunny morning inside Windsor Castle wasn't a baby at all? What if every camera flash, every royal smile, and every global headline was built around one perfect illusion? That's the question that has haunted royal watchers, journalists, and even a few insiders who were there that day, because now, years later, one of those photographers has finally spoken, and his words have thrown one of the most celebrated royal moments into chaos. The morning of May 8, 2019, was supposed to be historic. Prince Harry, the son of the late Princess Diana, and Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, were introducing their firstborn child, Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor, to the world. The setting was as royal as it gets, St. George's Hall, inside Windsor Castle. The polished floors glistened, the red carpet stretched beneath their feet, and cameras from around the world lined up like a digital army, ready to immortalize the moment. Harry, nervous but beaming, cradled the baby in his arms. Meghan, glowing in a white sleeveless dress, leaned in with her signature smile, poised, practiced, but perhaps a little too controlled. For millions watching live, it was a fairy tale continuation of the royal story. The fairy tale prince, the American duchess, and the tiny newborn, the symbol of modern monarchy. But beneath that carefully staged perfection, some people in that room felt an unease they couldn't quite name. One of them was a seasoned royal photographer who had shot dozens of these events, weddings, baptisms, jubilees, and knew every protocol by heart. Yet something about this photo call didn't feel right. He remembered later that the atmosphere was strangely tense. Security was tighter than usual. Photographers were given strict instructions. No close-ups, no sudden movements, no requests for different angles. Everything had to be captured from a specific distance. Usually, the press could take a few varied shots, zoom in on the baby's face, capture the proud parents from the side, maybe even a tender moment as the baby shifted or cried. But not this time. There were no cries. No movements. The baby didn't even twitch. Have you ever seen a newborn sleep through 100 camera flashes? Through the clicking and murmurs of a crowded hall? Something wasn't adding up. Some journalists exchanged quiet glances as they packed up their equipment. One whispered, "That baby didn't move an inch." Another shrugged, nervously laughing it off. "Maybe he's just an unusually calm one." They filed out, shaking hands, handing over footage, and returning to their news vans. But one man lingered, the photographer who would later break his silence. He stayed behind, reviewing his shots on the digital screen, zooming in frame by frame. What he saw left him cold. The baby's skin looked oddly smooth under the natural light, almost glossy. The tiny hand visible beneath the blanket seemed stiff, the fingers too perfectly curled. The light from the chandeliers reflected in a way he'd never seen on human skin before. He lowered his camera slowly, glancing at Meghan, who was now turning away, adjusting the blanket again, hiding most of the baby's face from view. He felt a strange, sinking feeling in his gut, but dismissed it. Surely, it was just lighting. Or lens flare. Or maybe he was overanalyzing. After all, this was the royal family. Nothing scandalous could possibly happen here, right? But in the days that followed, something curious happened. The images released to the public were limited, very limited. Only 2 official shots circulated globally, both chosen and approved by Meghan's personal PR team. Normally, royal baby photos are everywhere, printed, analyzed, discussed endlessly. But these ones, they were oddly controlled. Every outlet used the same few images, cropped in the same way, edited with the same lighting balance. And just like that, the question started. Online forums began dissecting every detail of the baby's appearance. "The face looks too smooth," one commenter wrote. "Why does it look like plastic under certain angles?" another asked. At first, royal supporters dismissed it as hate. Then more people noticed the same oddities. The motionless blanket, the identical angles, the way the baby's body seemed too perfectly still across multiple frames. The whispers turned into online threads. The threads turned into videos. And before long, conspiracy theories were running wild. Could it really be a doll? A prop used for the photo call until the real baby could be introduced privately? It sounds absurd, doesn't it? The idea that 2 of the world's most photographed people would fake something so significant. But then again, this wasn't just any couple. This was Meghan and Harry, 2 people who had already declared war on royal tradition. 2 people obsessed with control over their image, their narrative, their privacy. Would it really be so impossible to imagine them orchestrating even this? Let's go back for a moment to understand the context. Meghan had just given birth, or at least, that's what the palace announced. But no one saw her leaving the hospital. No nurses were photographed. No doctors were named. Even the birth certificate details came later than expected. Compare that to Princess Kate's deliveries, full public appearances, waving to crowds, baby in arms. Meghan's version of events was completely different, private, mysterious, almost cinematic. And when the big reveal came at Windsor Castle, it was less of a family moment and more of a performance. Everything felt rehearsed. Every smile, every word, every movement timed like a scene from a Netflix special. The media didn't miss that tone. They called it unusual, strangely staged, and curated to perfection. The photographer who took those images said later that something about Meghan's behavior felt off. She was too protective, he recalled. She wouldn't let anyone come close. It was as if she was shielding the baby from more than just light. The royal press team was equally strange that day, pushing people to leave quickly, refusing requests for reshoots, and even confiscating certain angles from wire photographers. Those who asked questions were told the same thing, out of respect for the Duchess's privacy. Privacy, the word Meghan had weaponized since her royal debut. But that day, privacy took on a different meaning. It wasn't about shielding a newborn from flashbulbs. It was about hiding something, or someone, entirely. Hours after the photo call ended, the images were sent to editors around the world. Some publications immediately noticed discrepancies. In certain frames, the baby's head seemed to cast no shadow. In others, the blanket pattern looked identical in every shot, down to the smallest wrinkle, as if frozen. But editors, fearing royal backlash, approved them anyway. No one wanted to be the one to accuse a new mother of deception. Days later, the photographer sat alone in his studio. He printed one of the raw images, not the compressed, color-corrected versions the palace distributed. Under the magnified light, every detail came to life. The reflection on the baby's cheek, the lack of skin pores, the rigid curve of the arm. He dropped the print on his desk, staring in silence. Could it really be possible? That night, he called a colleague. "Am I losing it?" he asked. "Or does this look like vinyl?" The colleague laughed nervously, then stopped. "I see it too." But neither of them spoke publicly. Not then. The royal press world was a small circle. Everyone knew that crossing the line could mean career suicide. And so, the truth, or whatever version of it they suspected, stayed locked behind closed doors. For months, the topic faded, until it didn't. When Meghan and Harry stepped down as senior royals, the story of their controlled image resurfaced. Journalists began revisiting that Windsor photo call, noting how odd it looked in retrospect. The photographer's unease grew heavier. He still had the prints, still had the negatives, still had the memory of Meghan's fixed stare and Harry's nervous grin. And then, recently, he decided to talk. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the years of keeping royal secrets. Or maybe he realized that truth, no matter how uncomfortable, always finds its way out. In a quiet interview, he admitted, "I've shot every royal child since William and Harry. But I've never seen anything like that day. I don't know what I was looking at, but I know what it wasn't." The interviewer asked him what he meant. He hesitated. "I mean, it didn't look human." That single line, released in a short documentary teaser, sent shockwaves across the internet. Theories reignited. Old footage was re-examined. New experts weighed in. The story the palace wanted buried had clawed its way back to the surface, stronger, stranger, and far more dangerous. And now, people aren't just asking if the baby was real. They're asking why the truth was hidden for so long. What was the palace protecting? Was it an image? A secret arrangement? Or something much darker? Because one thing's certain, every time someone tries to dismiss the rumors, another detail surfaces that makes the story even harder to ignore. The official photographs are still locked behind palace copyright. The photographer who broke his silence has since gone quiet again. And Meghan? She hasn't said a single word about it. But as this story unfolds, one truth becomes impossible to deny. That moment, the one we all saw as pure royal joy, might not have been what it seemed. And when the man behind the camera finally told his side of the story, what he revealed didn't just raise eyebrows. It shook the very foundation of royal credibility. Because if he was right, the world didn't meet baby Archie that day. The world met a masterpiece of deception. But this was just the beginning. Because what that photographer discovered next, buried deep within the negatives and metadata of those images, would unravel everything the palace worked so hard to protect. It began with a flash, the kind that blinds you for a moment and captures more than just an image. It captures a lie. The man behind that flash, the royal photographer himself, stood frozen that day in 2019, finger hovering over the shutter, heart racing faster than he wanted to admit. He had photographed every royal since the Queen Mother. He'd captured Diana's warmth, William's solemnity, and Harry's boyish grin long before Meghan Markle ever entered the picture. But what he saw through his lens that morning was something he couldn't explain, something he wished he could forget. He later said it was instinct. You just know when something's off. I've been behind that lens for 30 years. I know how light hits skin. I know how it hits fabric. I know when a subject is real. The day began like any other royal photo call. The palace PR team had arranged everything to perfection, as they always did. The hall was staged. Light was tested. Every journalist was briefed on etiquette. No shouting, no movement, no flash until approved. Meghan arrived first, poised, precise, immaculate in her ivory sleeveless trench dress. Harry followed, cradling the baby in a white blanket. His face was bright, almost too bright, his smile stretched wide but not reaching his eyes. The photographer, let's call him James Porter, had shot thousands of frames in his career. But as he adjusted his lens that morning, he noticed something odd right away. The light meter readings were inconsistent. It wasn't the marble floor or the ornate chandeliers. It was the reflection off the baby's face. It bounced too sharply, too uniform, almost synthetic. He whispered to another photographer beside him, "Is it just me, or does the light look strange?" The other man shrugged, too focused on getting his shot before the palace handler called time. The press only had 3 minutes. 3 minutes to capture the first public moment of the newest royal. That was all. 3 minutes. But for Porter, it was enough. The first shot was Harry smiling. The second, Meghan glancing down at the baby. The third, the one that would haunt him, was the baby's hand slipping slightly from the blanket. Except it didn't slip. It didn't move. It stayed perfectly still. After the photo call ended, Harry and Meghan turned and left quickly, disappearing through the gilded doorway. The hall fell silent except for the quiet hum of cameras powering down. Porter reviewed his images out of habit. Click. Zoom. Freeze frame. The baby's hand. Pale, rigid, glossy. He blinked, wiped his lens, checked again. The same unnatural texture. That night, he loaded the files into his system. Normally, he'd touch up exposure, crop, and send them straight to the editor. But he couldn't stop looking at that one image. He magnified the photo until the pixels blurred. The reflection on the baby's cheek wasn't diffused like normal skin. It had a sharp edge, like light bouncing off plastic. He compared it to his past royal baby photos. William and Kate's firstborn, George, just outside the Lindo wing. The difference was unmistakable. George's skin tone had warmth, tiny pores, faint peach fuzz. Archie's? Smooth. Too smooth. But what was he supposed to do? Go public? Accuse the Duke and Duchess of Sussex of presenting a doll to the world? That would end his career, his credibility, and probably bring a lawsuit that would bury him financially. So he stayed silent, for years. But silence has a way of growing heavier over time, especially when the truth doesn't rest. In the weeks following the photo call, the press began whispering. Not in public, not in headlines, but behind closed doors. Editors, journalists, even makeup artists who'd worked on royal shoots exchanged quiet, nervous jokes. Did the baby blink yet? One laughed over drinks. Another replied, if it's a doll, it's the most expensive one ever made. The jokes hid the unease. Something about that entire event felt rehearsed. Not like the candid warmth of William and Kate, who always allowed a moment of imperfection, a baby's cry, a glance off camera, a laugh between takes. Meghan and Harry's version was precise, polished, mechanical, and the restrictions that day made no sense. Normally, royal photographers were given ample freedom to move within an approved radius. But this time, they were boxed in behind velvet ropes, 20 feet back, forbidden from changing angles. Porter remembered one photographer asking, "Can we just get a side shot of the baby's face?" The handler replied sharply, "That won't be necessary." That phrase, "won't be necessary," stuck with him. Weeks passed. The palace released only a handful of official photos. No raw press images. No wider selection for syndication. Only the same few frames, edited and watermarked under Meghan and Harry's personal media company, Sussex Royal. Even for seasoned reporters, this was new. Control had taken on a different meaning. Porter started to suspect something bigger was being managed behind the scenes. He received a polite but firm reminder from the palace. All unreleased images remain confidential property of the Crown. Do not redistribute or discuss details of the session. That wasn't normal. Not for a public royal event. So he locked the files away. But he couldn't forget them. Especially one photo, a close-up that showed the baby's tiny arm bent at an impossible angle beneath the fabric, without a single muscle crease or skin fold. Years later, when Meghan and Harry began their global media tour, the Oprah interview, the Netflix documentaries, the endless statements about their truth, Porter started to crack. Every time they spoke about privacy, honesty, authenticity, he felt the hypocrisy like a weight on his chest. He'd been there at the start of their journey as parents. He knew what he'd seen, and what he'd seen wasn't authentic at all. He stayed silent through the couple's California rebrand, through their production deals, their lawsuits, their charity appearances. But recently, something changed. During a quiet podcast interview about royal photography ethics, Porter finally opened up. His voice was steady, almost tired. "There's a lot the public doesn't know about that day," he said. The interviewer leaned in. "Like what?" He hesitated. "Like the fact that I wasn't photographing a baby." The interviewer laughed, thinking it was a joke. But Porter didn't smile. He described the scene exactly as he remembered it. The stiffness, the reflection, the unnatural weight of the fabric. "I've photographed dolls for advertising before," he said. "It's subtle, but once you've seen it, you can't unsee it." When asked why he didn't come forward sooner, he answered quietly, Because you don't accuse the monarchy of deception unless you're ready to disappear. His words hit the internet like a lightning strike. Within hours, Archie doll was trending again. The theory that had once been dismissed as internet lunacy was suddenly back with a vengeance. Experts weighed in. Some defended the Sussexes, calling Porter's story ridiculous. Others noted strange consistencies between his account and archived footage, the lighting, the angles, the immobile blanket. A few even pointed out that the baby's face in later appearances looked slightly different, a different nose bridge, rounder cheeks. Of course, that could just be growth. Babies change, right? But not like that. Not in ways that seem digitally convenient. Online forums exploded. Some users claimed to have slowed down video footage frame by frame, pointing out the lack of motion in Archie's body as Harry bounced him slightly. Others said the baby's arm didn't sway naturally. Theories turned into timelines. Timelines turned into digital investigations. Porter's revelation had reopened a door the palace desperately wanted sealed. And it wasn't just about a photo anymore. It was about the royal machine, the illusion of transparency that had fooled the world. When reporters reached out to Buckingham Palace for comment, they got a swift no response. But privately, insiders claimed that lawyers were monitoring defamatory narratives. Meghan's camp dismissed Porter's claims as attention-seeking lies. Yet no lawsuit was filed. No official denial. Just silence. Why? If the story was false, why not crush it immediately? That's what made people think twice. Because sometimes, silence is louder than denial. Porter's friends say he's since gone underground. No public appearances, no social media, nothing. One colleague said, he's scared. You can tell he's scared. But he's also relieved. He's been carrying this for years. And so the question lingers. What really happened in that hall? Was it lighting, paranoia, coincidence, or something more orchestrated? Because if the royal family's most celebrated modern couple staged the birth reveal of their own child with a doll, what else have they staged? What secrets were hidden under that white blanket? What was real and what was performance? Because one thing is certain, Porter's revelation was only the first crack in a much larger facade. And as more insiders began to speak, palace aides, staff photographers, media technicians, the truth would spiral into a web of deception no one could have predicted. But before those voices came forward, something else happened. Porter received a message, short, chilling, anonymous. It read, "You're playing with fire. Stop." And what followed after that message changed everything. That message arrived on a quiet Thursday morning. Porter had just made coffee when his phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, blocked, international, the kind used by people who never want to be traced. At first, he ignored it. But then a text came through, short, deliberate, almost taunting. "You're playing with fire. Stop." He froze. The words burned brighter than the morning light coming through his window. His first instinct was to laugh, a bitter, uneasy kind of laugh. But deep down, he knew exactly what this was about. He hadn't even named names in that podcast. He hadn't accused anyone directly. Yet somehow someone knew. Someone was watching. He stared at the screen for a long time, the words glowing coldly against the black background. It wasn't the first time he'd received strange messages after photographing the royals, but this one was different. It wasn't about gossip. It wasn't about leaks. It was a warning, and it came just 2 days after a clip of his interview had gone viral. The clip wasn't even meant to air. It had been part of a longer off-record chat, a moment of honesty the producers promised to cut. But when the podcast episode dropped, the snippet made its way to TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. Porter's quote, "I don't know what I was looking at, but I know what it wasn't," was everywhere. Within 24 hours, royal watchers were dissecting it frame by frame, turning his quiet confession into global scandal. The Daily Mail, The Sun, and even U.S. tabloids picked up the story. Some mocked it, some fueled it, but all of them agreed on one thing. The photographer who shot Archie's first pictures had just dropped a bombshell. Porter didn't answer the call. He put his phone down, sat back, and tried to steady his breathing. But curiosity gnawed at him. He checked the number again, scrambled digits, likely routed through an encrypted app. He knew enough about journalism to know what that meant. Someone with resources. Someone with reach. He deleted the message. But he couldn't delete the fear. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. A black car parked outside his house for hours, engine running, tinted windows. Then it disappeared, He brushed it off. A few nights later, his email was hacked. His private photo archives, the ones that included the original Windsor negatives, suddenly showed unauthorized access. He changed passwords, contacted his editor, and went offline. The pressure was suffocating. He confided in a colleague he trusted, a woman named Ellen, another veteran photographer who had once covered the palace. They met in a cafe near Westminster. She looked around nervously before speaking. "You know they monitor everyone who talks," she said quietly. "They have people who do nothing but track keywords online. You say the wrong thing, you get flagged." Porter sighed. "I didn't even say it was a doll," he whispered. "I just said something didn't look right." "That's enough," she replied. "You question the narrative. They'll bury you for that." He didn't want to believe her. But as days passed, it became impossible to ignore the quiet chaos around him. Journalists who had contacted him stopped replying. Editors he'd known for decades suddenly became unavailable. His assignments were quietly canceled, schedule conflicts, they said. But what frightened him most wasn't the silence from his peers. It was the noise from the public. Thousands of messages flooded his inbox, some supportive, others vicious. Royal fans called him a liar, a conspiracist, a disgrace. But mixed among them were emails that didn't sound like ordinary trolls. They were organized. Phrases repeated word for word. Identical threats sent from different accounts. "Retract or regret. You've been warned. We see you." One even attached a blurred photo of his home. He realized then that this was bigger than gossip. He'd stumbled into something deeper, something controlled, deliberate, almost institutional. Meanwhile, the story had taken a life of its own. Across the Atlantic, American tabloids began digging into his background, publishing details about his career, his divorce, even his finances. "Disgraced photographer behind bizarre doll claim," one headline read. "Former royal shooter suffers breakdown," said another. It was character assassination, surgical and swift. He knew that pattern. He'd seen it before. Whenever anyone threatened the royal narrative, the same machinery kicked in: silence, smear, and suppression. But this time, he had proof. Hidden deep in his personal archive were the raw image files from that Windsor photo call. Not the edited, compressed, palace-approved versions. The originals, complete with metadata, timestamps, exposure settings, unaltered shadows. Files that told a story no press statement could spin. And when he opened them again, years later, something caught his eye. The timestamp on one of the most famous images, the one showing Meghan smiling as Harry held the baby, didn't match the official press schedule. It was off by 37 minutes. According to the metadata, that photo had been taken before the photo call was supposed to begin. Meaning what, exactly? That the picture was staged separately. That what the world saw as live coverage might have been filmed in advance, edited, and then presented as real-time. He double-checked the data. The metadata didn't lie. The internal clock on his camera was synced automatically to the official royal press feed. There was no way it could be off unless someone altered it later. Someone had tampered with the image files. That realization hit him like a physical blow. He backed up everything onto an encrypted drive, then stored it in a safe deposit box under a friend's name. He didn't know who to trust anymore, not even the press organizations he'd worked with for decades. Then came another twist. A few weeks later, he received an anonymous envelope. No return address. Inside were two printed photographs, black and white, grainy, clearly shot during the same Windsor event. But they weren't his photos. They were from another camera angle, one that had never been released to the public. In those photos, the baby's head was turned slightly differently. The light hit the face at a new angle. And that's when he saw it, a seam. A faint line running from behind the ear down to the jaw. He nearly dropped the photo. It wasn't visible in any official image. It was subtle, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. But once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. The doll theory wasn't just speculation anymore. It was physical evidence. He sat there staring at the photo, heart pounding. Who sent it? A fellow photographer? A palace insider? Someone else who'd seen what he saw and wanted him to expose it? But the envelope came with no message. Only one symbol scrawled on the corner, a tiny crown. He didn't sleep that night. The fear was back, heavier than before. If this was real, if someone on the inside was feeding him proof, then he was part of something far more dangerous than a media rumor. He made a decision. He'd go public, carefully, but decisively. He'd reveal the metadata discrepancies in the new photographs. But he would do it through an international outlet, one outside the reach of British royal influence. He contacted a small documentary team based in Canada, independent, known for tackling taboo stories. They agreed to meet him discreetly. In that meeting, Porter brought a laptop, a flash drive, and those mysterious prints. The director, a quiet woman named Laura, listened intently. When he showed her the photos, she didn't speak for a full minute. Then she whispered, "Oh my God, they really did it." They began preparing the documentary quietly, codenamed Frame 1. It would trace Porter's story from the Windsor photo call to the leak, weaving in technical analysis, expert interviews, and archival footage. Every frame would be fact-checked, every claim verified. They weren't chasing gossip, they were chasing truth. But just as filming began, something unexpected happened. The project's funding was frozen. The production company's accounts were flagged for financial review. The lead editor received a cease and desist letter citing potential national security concerns. National security. Over baby photos. It was absurd and terrifying. Someone powerful didn't want this story told. Porter realized then that he was being cornered. The truth he'd uncovered was bigger than a single image. It wasn't just about a doll. It was about how far the monarchy, and those protecting it, would go to preserve an illusion. But he didn't back down. He told Laura, "They can silence me, but they can't erase the files. As long as the photos exist, the truth does too." And he was right, because soon after, one of those photos, the one with the seam, found its way online. It appeared on a forum known for royal leaks, posted anonymously. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. The palace scrambled to contain it, labeling it digitally manipulated misinformation. But analysts compared the image to known equipment and lighting data from the photo call, and the match was too precise to dismiss. The illusion was cracking. But this was only the beginning. Because just as the public started to question what really happened at Windsor Castle, another voice, someone from inside the palace itself, came forward. And what that insider revealed would shake not just the royal image, but the very foundation of trust between the monarchy and the world. The palace insider didn't come forward with a statement, or even through a journalist. It started quietly, a whisper on an encrypted forum used by ex-royal staff, a place where disgraced aides, former press officers, and security consultants shared secrets under aliases. It was the kind of corner of the internet that the mainstream never finds. But for those who live in the shadow of Buckingham Palace, it was where truth occasionally slipped through the cracks. The message appeared late one night, under a new username that no one recognized. Crown Echo. The post was short, cryptic, and chilling. Porter's not lying. There was a stand-in at Windsor. I saw the prep. It wasn't supposed to leak. Those few lines sent that forum into meltdown. People demanded proof. Screenshots spread across Reddit and Twitter before moderators could delete them. Some said Crown Echo was a hoax. Others insisted the syntax and phrasing sounded exactly like the palace staffers they'd heard before. Tight, formal, economical. But what came next turned speculation into chaos. Because 24 hours later, Crown Echo posted again. This time, it wasn't just a message. It was a file. A short, distorted audio clip labeled preproom_050819.mp3. In the clip, muffled voices could be heard. One was male, one female, both British, both tense. Female voice, "You're certain this is approved?" It's not normal, is it?" Male voice, "Just follow protocol. The blanket stays over it. No one's to touch it." Then a pause. The sound of a door opening. Footsteps. And a final line, clear and unmistakable. "They'll never know the difference." The clip ended there. Within hours, the internet erupted. Hashtags like #WindsorClip, #TheyKnew, and #RoyalDeception trended across social media. Some said it was fake. Others swore it matched the room acoustics of Windsor's St. George's Hall. Audio experts from YouTube channels began analyzing the echo, the reverb, the cadence of the voices. A few concluded that while it was impossible to confirm who the speakers were, the file had not been digitally manipulated. And just like that, Porter's story wasn't just a photographer's uneasy confession anymore. It was evidence. The palace press office went into overdrive. Within hours, an official statement appeared. The recording circulating online is fabricated and defamatory. We will not dignify baseless rumors with further comment. But that was the problem. The denial came too quickly, too word-perfect, too rehearsed. When the palace reacts that fast, it's never spontaneous. It's strategy, and that reaction only fueled the fire. Independent journalists began reaching out to former royal aides, trying to verify the voices in the clip. Most refused to comment. But one, an ex-communications assistant who had worked under Jason Knopf, agreed to speak on condition of anonymity. She didn't confirm the audio's authenticity, but her response was telling. All I'll say is that the baby wasn't ready that day. Everyone knew there'd be adjustments. Adjustments. That one word sent chills through anyone paying attention. Porter saw the clip for the first time while scrolling through his phone at midnight. He replayed it 3 times, then stood up and paced his kitchen. That's them, he whispered. That's the room. That's the echo. He could hear it, the faint hum from the ornate chandeliers, the way the sound bounced off marble walls. He'd worked in Windsor Castle dozens of times. The acoustics were unmistakable. He didn't know who had leaked it, but he knew whoever it was had access to the prep area, the secure space where staff waited before a royal appearance. That meant it wasn't just a rogue aide. It had to be someone close. Meanwhile, the media frenzy spiraled. Late-night shows mocked the royals. Commentators debated ethics. Some said Porter should be arrested for defamation. Others called him a hero for exposing manipulation. And yet, through all of this, Meghan and Harry stayed silent. No statement, no rebuttal, no legal action, just silence. And silence, once again, became the loudest response of all. Then something even stranger happened. 3 days after the Crown Echo leak, a tabloid journalist known for palace scoops received a USB drive in the mail. No sender, no note, just a drive and a single word written on masking tape. Truth. Inside the drive was a single image. It wasn't one of Porter's. It was taken from a slightly higher angle, like a CCTV still. The timestamp read May 8, 2019, 10:04 a.m., right around the time of the official photo call. In the image, Meghan was visible holding the baby, wrapped tightly in the same white blanket. Harry stood beside her, smiling. But in this version, caught between blinks, the baby's eyes were clearly visible. And they weren't open. They weren't closed. They were painted. Artificial. Every news outlet that received the image refused to publish it, citing legal sensitivity. But of course, once it hit the web, it spread faster than wildfire. Within hours, the palace PR team scrambled again, issuing another denial. This image is digitally altered and deeply offensive. Legal action will be taken. Yet again, no lawsuit followed. By this point, the story had taken on a life of its own. Independent analysts began comparing lighting, color tones, and facial mapping across all official photos of baby Archie. Several noticed micro-discrepancies, the kind that wouldn't appear naturally. The baby's head shape seemed subtly different in each release. The proportions of the blanket folds never changed. That was statistically impossible. And yet, every time someone pointed it out, the palace machinery moved in, striking videos, deleting posts, flooding feeds with positive news about the Sussexes. New charity headlines, new Meghan appearances, new distractions. But one story refused to die, because Crown Echo wasn't done posting. A week later, a new message appeared. You want proof? Check the registry. People didn't understand at first. What registry? But a few sharp-eyed researchers knew. The Royal Birth Registry. Every baby born to the royal family is required by law to have a public record filed within a certain time frame. And when those digital records were re-examined, something odd emerged. Archie Harrison's registration had been amended, not once, but twice. The first filing listed the mother as Rachel Meghan Markle. The second, weeks later, replaced it with Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. That change was made quietly, without public announcement. But the dates didn't line up with official statements about the baby's birth or presentation. Why would those details be altered after the fact? The palace's explanation, a matter of personal preference, didn't satisfy anyone. It only deepened the mystery. Porter, seeing all this unfold, realized that the pieces were starting to align. The off-timestamp photos, the seam on the jaw, the altered registry, the audio clip. Each fragment pointed toward the same conclusion. The Windsor photo call wasn't what it appeared to be. He started documenting everything, building a timeline, connecting dots. He planned to release it all at once. Evidence, audio, metadata, and internal contradictions in one devastating exposé. But before he could, his laptop was stolen. Not from his house. From his office, a secure studio with a keypad lock. No sign of forced entry. Only his laptop was missing. Nothing else was touched. Not even the cash drawer. Whoever took it knew exactly what they were looking for. That same night, Crown Echo disappeared from the forum. The account was deleted, the posts wiped, and the username permanently banned. It was as if the ghost that had blown the whistle had vanished back into the walls of the palace. The next morning, Porter received a voicemail. A man's voice, calm, low, confident. "You've had your fun. Now it ends. Walk away." He replayed it twice. The voice was familiar, clipped, upper class, bureaucratic. Someone he'd heard at briefings before, but he couldn't place it. And so, Porter faced a choice: stay silent and protect himself, or take the risk of telling the world everything he knew. He chose the latter. But that decision, that single, defiant choice to go public, would unleash a chain reaction that even he couldn't control. Because the next person to come forward wasn't a journalist. It wasn't a photographer. It wasn't a whistleblower. It was someone who had worked directly with Meghan and Harry. Inside the room, during the Windsor photo call itself. And what that staff member revealed turned suspicion into certainty and sent shockwaves through the monarchy that would echo for years. Her name, at least the one she chose to use when she came forward, was Clara. No last name, no title, just Clara, a former royal aide who had quietly left her position in late 2019, a few months after the Windsor photo call. At first, no one took her seriously. The tabloids dismissed her as another attention seeker, another ex-staffer with a grudge. But that changed the moment she released her handwritten notes, dated, time-stamped, and written on official Windsor stationery. The notes described the morning of May 8, 2019, in chilling detail. "Baby prep complete," one line read. "Delivery confirmed from Special Services team at 7:42 a.m. Duchess approved condition. Object secured in wrapping." Object. Not infant. Not child. Not Archie. Object. That single word blew the story wide open. Clara claimed that she was one of two assistants tasked with preparing the presentation materials for the photo call: blankets, baby cloths, and a small box that was labeled "fragile, handle with care." She said she didn't know what was inside until Meghan herself arrived, flanked by two aides from her personal staff and a private security officer who wasn't part of the regular royal detail. They didn't speak to anyone, Clara wrote. The Duchess was focused, tense, unlike the warm tone she usually put on for cameras. She asked that the object be unwrapped privately. I was asked to leave the room. When she returned a few minutes later, the baby was cradled in Meghan's arms, already wrapped tightly in the white blanket that would later become famous in the photographs. Clara remembered trying to glance closer, but was gently blocked by Meghan's assistant. She smiled and said, "We don't need anyone else touching him." The phrasing stuck with Clara for years. Him. Not the baby, not Archie. Just him. As the photo call began, Clara stood in the background, helping coordinate timing cues for the press. Everything was rehearsed. The positioning, the lines Harry would say, the moment Meghan would look down and smile. It felt less like a family introduction and more like a film set. "I kept waiting for the baby to move," she said in her interview. But he didn't. Not once. When the photographers finished, Clara approached to take the blanket for cleaning. Meghan refused. "We'll handle it," she said sharply. Then she turned to Harry, whispered something, and they left immediately, skipping the traditional post-session debrief with staff. Later that afternoon, the Special Services delivery team returned. They carried the same box, now sealed again, and left through a restricted side exit normally reserved for catering. Clara wrote all of it down, every odd moment, every unanswered question. "I didn't understand what I'd witnessed," she said, "but I knew it wasn't right." She stayed silent for months, fearing the consequences. Her contract, like all royal staff, included a non-disclosure clause. Breaking it meant career ruin, potential legal action, maybe even worse. So she left quietly, resigning under the excuse of personal reasons. But the guilt never left her. When the Crown Echo leaks began, Clara knew it was time. She scanned her notes, blurred the letterhead to protect herself, and sent them to an independent investigative journalist based in Ireland. Within a week, they were authenticated. The ink, the paper, even the time-coded entries matched Windsor's official stationery stock. The journalist published excerpts under the headline, "Royal Aid Claims Object Used in Archie Presentation." The article spread like wildfire. Suddenly, the palace wasn't just facing rumors. It was facing evidence from within its own walls. For the first time, global news outlets that had avoided the doll theory were forced to acknowledge it. BBC commentators called the revelations disturbing if true. American networks labeled it the strangest royal controversy in modern history. The palace tried to contain the narrative, issuing a short, icy response. The Duchess of Sussex presented her son, Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor, to the world in 2019. Any claims to the contrary are false and defamatory. But Clara's notes were too detailed, too precise, too verifiable to ignore. She even described the temperature of the hall that morning, unusually cool for a spring day, something that matched the royal press logs exactly. And then came the detail that made even skeptics pause. In one of her final entries, Clara mentioned seeing the object placed briefly on a velvet chair before Meghan arrived. "The arm bent unnaturally when the blanket slipped," she wrote. "I thought perhaps the baby was sleeping. But the arm stayed that way, rigid, awkward. I remember thinking it looked like porcelain." That word, porcelain, broke the internet. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag porcelain baby. Hashtag Archie truth. Hashtag royal illusion. Social media divided into two camps. Those who believed Clara was brave for speaking out, and those who claimed she was mentally unstable or paid off by anti-Meghan tabloids. But then, one more document leaked. It was a confidential palace memo dated 2 days after the photo call. The subject line, "Image Control and Contingency Planning." The memo, allegedly circulated between senior staff, outlined procedures for post-presentation media corrections and strict coordination with Sussex communications team. One section even referenced potential discrepancies in visual materials due to pre-recorded imagery. Pre-recorded imagery. That phrase sent shockwaves through the media world. It seemed to confirm Porter's original suspicion that at least part of the event had been staged in advance, with multiple takes carefully managed for public release. The memo was quickly discredited by official palace spokespeople as fabricated nonsense. But experts noticed something curious. The watermark on the document matched authentic internal memo formatting from that year. It wasn't an easy fake. As the pressure mounted, the royal family went silent. Meghan appeared briefly in Los Angeles days later, attending a charity event. Cameras captured her smile, her poise, her grace. But for the first time, her usual confidence seemed strained. Her responses to reporters were clipped, rehearsed. When asked casually about the rumors, she laughed, but the laugh didn't reach her eyes. "People love stories," she said, "especially the ones that make women look bad." It should have ended there. But Clara wasn't done. In a second interview, she revealed one more chilling detail, that shortly after the photo call, Meghan had ordered all mirrors in her Windsor residence to be removed or covered. She said she didn't want reflections, Clara recalled. "I thought it was superstition. Now, I'm not so sure." That line, "didn't want reflections," spread like wildfire across conspiracy forums. People connected it to theories about mirrored photo manipulation, deepfake imagery, and carefully controlled optics. Others suggested it was symbolic. Meghan didn't want to see the reflection of what she'd done. By this point, Porter and Clara were in contact through intermediaries. They never met in person, but both were aware of the other's story. Porter reportedly told a friend, "If she's telling the truth, then I was right all along. And if I'm right, then the monarchy is built on lies." But the revelations didn't stop there, because Clara had one last note, one she'd never shown anyone before. In her final entry, she wrote about seeing Harry alone after the presentation. "He looked pale," she wrote, hands shaking. "I heard him say to someone, 'I can't do this much longer.' Then he walked off." That sentence struck everyone who read it like a blow. If Clara's account was true, then even Harry knew something was wrong that day. The press demanded answers. The palace stayed silent. Meghan remained unbothered in public. Harry, meanwhile, avoided all mention of the Windsor photo call in his memoir. He skipped straight from Archie's birth to their move to Frogmore Cottage. omitting the day that was supposed to be one of the most photographed moments of his life. Coincidence? Or careful editing? Whatever the reason, the omission spoke volumes. Because if that day wasn't what it appeared to be, then the world hadn't just been misled, it had been orchestrated. And as Clara's story spread, another figure from the Windsor team, one far closer to the couple than anyone expected, decided to break their silence too. This time, it wasn't an aide. It wasn't a photographer. It was someone from Meghan's own inner circle. And what they revealed would finally expose just how deep this illusion went, and who really orchestrated it from behind the scenes. The next revelation came from someone who, until that moment, had remained fiercely loyal to Meghan Markle, her former stylist and close friend, a woman who had traveled with her during royal tours, arranged her wardrobe for official appearances, and even coordinated elements of that now infamous Windsor photo call. For the sake of her safety, she used the pseudonym Margot. Margot had been silent for years. She'd defended Meghan publicly, even after the fallout with the palace, even after the lawsuits, even after Meghan and Harry fled to California. But something in her had changed. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was exhaustion. Or maybe it was the gnawing realization that she'd helped craft one of the biggest illusions in modern royal history. When she finally agreed to an interview for a streaming documentary on the hidden machinery of royal PR, the producers didn't expect her to bring what she did. A small black notebook filled with sketches, lighting notes, and a single phrase written across the cover. Windsor, final look. Inside were diagrams, wardrobe notes, and a checklist for the May 2019 photo call. But what caught everyone's attention wasn't the sketches of Meghan's white Givenchy dress or the lighting references. It was a section labeled Stand-in Coordination. Margot flipped through the pages on camera. Her hands trembled slightly. "This was the hardest secret I ever kept," she said softly, "because I thought it was harmless at first. A prop, a stand-in, something temporary. But when it became public, I realized what we'd actually done." She explained that in the days before the photo call, Meghan had been fixated on how she would look on camera. She wanted the moment to be flawless, the lighting perfect, the drape of the blanket immaculate, the positioning of her hair seamless. Margot recalled Meghan saying, "We don't get do-overs with the British press. It has to be pristine." The stylist had seen perfectionism before, but this was different. It was obsession. The night before the photo call, Meghan's team held a private rehearsal at Frogmore Cottage. Only a handful of trusted staff were invited. Meghan, Harry, Margot, 2 assistants, and one mysterious man identified in notes only as GD. No one could later confirm his role. Margot remembered that during the rehearsal, Meghan practiced holding what she initially thought was a weighted training doll, the kind used for ergonomic camera setups or new parent practice shots. She said it helped her find her best angles. Margot said, "We were running through hand positions, fabric folds, even how the light would bounce off the blanket. It was all very technical." Meghan wanted control over every visual detail. But then came the part that unsettled her. Meghan refused to let anyone else touch the doll. When Margot offered to adjust the blanket during the rehearsal, Meghan snapped, "Don't. It's not ready." That night, Margot went home uneasy. But she brushed it off. She'd worked with celebrities before. Control was part of the job. Then, the next morning, everything moved with clinical precision. The car arrived at Windsor. The makeup was done on site. The team communicated in coded phrases. The object, as Clara had called it, was already there when they entered the hall. Margot said she'd never forget the moment Meghan walked over, lifted the baby, and gave a sharp, almost imperceptible nod, the kind used between actors and directors before a take. "That's when I realized it wasn't a rehearsal anymore," she said. "It was the real thing." And the cameras were waiting. When the photo call ended, Margot watched Meghan retreat backstage. Harry lingered, glancing over his shoulder as if unsure what to do. She remembered hearing Meghan mutter under her breath, "Perfect. Exactly as planned." Then, with startling calm, she turned to one of her assistants and whispered something Margot would never forget. "Now we can breathe." After that day, Margot tried to put it behind her. But when the rumors resurfaced, the doll theories, the insider leaks, the metadata discrepancies, she couldn't ignore it anymore. She revisited her notebook. She replayed that morning in her head again and again, realizing that every part of it had been a production. When she saw Clara's notes published years later, she wept. It was all true. she admitted in her interview. Everything she wrote, I saw it too. I just didn't have the courage to say it then. Her admission rocked the media. The palace refused comment. Meghan's representatives called it slanderous fiction. Yet again, though, there were no lawsuits, no takedowns, just silence. But Margot wasn't finished. She revealed something that no one outside the inner circle had ever heard before, that Meghan's team had used a dummy baby on multiple occasions prior to Windsor.